Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lyrian Gaylor Baird, Mayor of the great city of Lincoln, Nebraska, and the second Vice President of the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And I'm so delighted that you have been able to join us today for what is the 100th Local Infrastructure Hub webinar session that is devoted to the implementation of the IIJA and climate provisions of the IRA. Thank you so much to our hosts for inviting me to moderate today's session, which will be focused on that project implementation and the importance of infrastructure funding going directly to our cities. For those of you who may not be here for the 100th time, but maybe just for the first time, the Local Infrastructure Hub is a national program that connects cities and towns with resources and expert advice that are so helpful as we seek to both access this infrastructure funding and then put it to the purpose it's meant for, which is to drive local progress. Through the hub, city and town leaders can access this kind of hands-on grant application assistance and training to secure those Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funds and Inflation Reduction Act funds. And it consists of workshops, one-on-one office hours, and other really actionable, meaningful, practical resources. You can sign up to learn more about that program at localinfrastructure.org. But today's session, which was developed by Results for America, Bloomberg Philanthropies, and the U.S. Conference of Mayors, is going to feature some wonderful stories of cities who have accessed these competitive or direct funding opportunities to advance infrastructure projects that make life better in our communities. Our panel of experts today will be providing their wisdom and advice for other cities to be able to leverage funding opportunities as they have. And I'm really thrilled to be in their presence, thrilled to welcome them as panelists, starting with Selena Benitez, who is the mayor of Mount Rainier, Maryland. She holds the distinction of being the first Latina mayor of the city of Mount Rainier. And as a really dedicated public servant, Mayor Benitez is at the forefront of several city initiatives that are critical to address food insecurity, empower small businesses, and promote environmentally sustainable practices. We also are joined by my fellow Midwestern mayor, Quentin Lucas, the mayor of Kansas City, Missouri. And Mayor Lucas is on the advisory board for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and he chairs our Criminal and Social Justice Standing Committee. He was first elected to mayor in 2019, and since then has been able to bring more than $100 million in federal, state, and private grants to improve Kansas City's infrastructures. Someone has to keep those fountains running. And then we also have Brian Waller joining us today, who is the mayor of Piscataway, New Jersey. And Mayor Waller is the chair of the U.S. Conference of Mayors Legislative Action Committee and also serves on the advisory board. And I will just say, point of personal privilege, a fellow Big Ten mayor.
Oh,
And then
Big
last but
Ten.
not least, we have Kirk Watson, the mayor of Austin, Texas. Mayor Watson was first elected mayor in 1997, and he's now in his third term of office after serving more than 13 years in the Texas Senate. So as you can tell, we have a lot of dedicated public servants with a lot of years under their belts, and we are so excited to welcome them today. I hope you'll join me in welcoming them. And what I plan to do is ask them, pose a series of questions and ask them each to provide their insights. And we'll start with Mayor Quentin Lucas because he does have to go earlier today than the rest. And when I kick the microphone to you, I hope you'll share a little bit more about yourself and then your insights on the questions at hand. So we'll start, Mayor Q, with you. How are you using federal infrastructure funds to advance your city's vision for its future?
So it is great to be with everybody. Always good to be with Mayor Baird, who does outstanding work in Lincoln. I don't want it to be so good that everybody moves up there from Kansas City because we're close, but honored to be with her. Let me kind of like jump ahead of the conversation and maybe we are. The way we're using infrastructure funds right now is step one, to not freak out. We have spent, and many jurisdictions have spent a lot of time over the past year thinking about challenges as it relates to programs, trying to come up with contingencies. That is important work. but it's also vital that you make sure that the infrastructure funds that you have in today in your community, you are still letting contracts, you're still finding your local match, an important part of how we do these things, and you are actually still operating in a world where the programs continue to exist. We have a view in Kansas City that until somebody takes something out of my cold dead hands, right, then I have the opportunity to continue to plan our bridge projects. We were good recipients of that to help replace 12 bridges in Kansas City. Reconnecting communities. Many of you have these, the highways that divide communities. In some ways, there are reinterpretations as to how the program works, but that still is largely in effect. And frankly, we're still being creative in areas that you think may not still exist, but still do. In Kansas City, we received a U.S. Department of Agriculture grant to help enhance our tree canopy, planting tens of thousands of trees in Kansas City. And so that's the sort of thing that we are still seeing progress on. Our partners in the relevant federal administrative agencies continue to do work on grant processing, particularly now, right? Continue to have that desire of working with you. So for us, it's really full speed ahead and making sure that we're activating what we've already been lucky enough to receive.
Well, wonderful. That's great advice. Stay the course, stay steady. Mayor Watson, do you want to share a few comments about how you're using federal infrastructure funds to advance your city's vision for its
Yeah,
future?
and I really appreciate the opportunity to get to meet with all of you and to talk a little bit about this. Yeah, I'll mention first the three grants that were key grants, and then I'll talk a little bit about why I think they're so key. One is we had have a $32 million bridge investment program grant, and I'm going to come back to that. And then another one is a separate set aside 22.8 million Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, in addition to a $10.4 million grant of that nature. And the way we have approached these is we have looked at them from the standpoint of what it does for Austin, of course, but the role it also plays in our regional mobility and how we have to interact with all of the different parts of the region. For example, the two SS4A grants that I mentioned are specifically noteworthy because we're using those grants and we're going to use them to improve safety at various intersections and along our corridors that in our Vision Zero plan we identified as priorities. And that groundbreaking program helps us focus not just on improving safety, but also keeping things like the movement of those corridors, again, in sort of the regional planning process as our top priority. The way we're looking at it and the way we talk about it is that improving safety in that manner helps us address the need for all users, especially the vulnerable users, because and therefore it's part of our local and regional mobility, and it's not that complicated when you actually stop and think about it. When street design ends up focusing on safety for all of our users, it's naturally going to improve our regional mobility. But that doesn't always get talked about in that way. And of course, when we improve safety for our local and improve our local and regional mobility, we're making the investments that we can also then point, and that's very important going forward. We can point to how that helps grow our economy. I find it interesting that sometimes improvement of quality of life doesn't rise up the way we as mayors think about it sometimes. And as planners, I see in the chat the number of planners we have. But when we talk about the role it ends up playing in the economy, right now, that is a key way for us to, as Mayor Lucas indicates, stay the course on this.
Absolutely. In Lincoln, we're also devoting a lot of our federal resources from the Department of Transportation for precisely that, improving safety on our streets that benefits not just the cars, but the pedestrians, the train vehicle conflicts. We want to make sure that everyone is safe on our transportation infrastructure. Okay, with that, Mayor Benitez, we'd love to hear from you. How are you advancing your vision in Mount Rainier, Maryland, with infrastructure funds that you've received?
Oh, thank you for having me. So it's wonderful to join a panel of like people that love their city and love infrastructure. I think that most people don't talk about the importance, but in order for you to be able to aim at the economy and growing your city, you need infrastructure. And the challenge we always have is like, where's that money coming from? Because we all know sidewalks and streets, speed bumps are really expensive, right? So to understand how we're able to use the money, I will tell you the city of Rainier is 8,500 people, 1 mile with all those wonderful people, and highest density populated city in the whole entire state of Maryland. So we're this little compared to the other cities that are in the panel, right? But in saying that, I will tell you we have two elementary school, two senior buildings, and dozens of apartment doors, right? We heavily, strongly believe that we need to, walk in our city, bike in our city, roll in our city. But it's beautiful to say that. But if your sidewalks are not conditioned, they don't exist, and it's not safe, it's not going to happen. So when we talk about and I think the other mayors mentioned it, the Vision Zero, we're a small city with a small budget where we put the vision forward. We're very like visionaries and saying this is what we like to work on, and we put 5% of our budget towards that every year. The infrastructure hub, we got $9.7 million for a small city of our size that has been generational impacting. Yes, this year alone, we have been able to get $500,000 reimbursed, and we continue to do work. That includes 120 ADA ramps, right? Flexible pavement that is also permeable in order to address our water storm management issues. Walkability, be able to have trees grow and the roots so we coexist with nature and making sure we have the ability to be able to walk and get through town. That has allowed for us to do so many things. If you think the 1% to the 20% match in the money that we're getting, it will have taken us like close to 100 years, as many sessions as we've had currently, in order for us to be able to do the changes that we're doing now. But people are seeing the impacts that are happening year after year, and the fact that it's not just promises, it's not just a study that's being like archived. We're fortunate to be the only city to be able to apply for implementation money in the whole entire state of Maryland in this round, because a lot of cities felt that they were too small, having a lot more people than we did to be able to apply. But I will tell you, without the infrastructure hub helping us, we will not have believed to be able to grab the data information and the support we got to be able to apply, which has led a lot more cities in Maryland now applying. But for us, it truly shows that even if you're a small city, that direct funding makes big impact, and you could also get it and see how far it goes, along with having a nice network of various mayors and elected officials that also serve as your support system and let you know where things are going. So at least from our Rainier, it's been generational transformation in so many ways. And we're very happy to be part of this wonderful club, and we're hoping more people join as well.
Well, absolutely. Thank you, Mayor Benitez. You're so right. Our budgets, whether you're a big city or a smaller city, they often can't keep up with the rising cost of infrastructure. The price of concrete alone goes up and up and up. And when you get this money that's more significant from the federal government, you get that work done earlier, which saves you money. And that's so important when you have limited resources. So thanks for that insight. Um, all right, Mayor Waller, saving
Well,
last but not least.
I want to thank you, Mayor Bird, for having me on the anniversary of the 100th Zoom call of the Infrastructure Hub. I think the one program that is applicable to what people want to speak about today is the Piscataway Goes Green initiative. It was a groundbreaking municipal program that aimed to transforming energy usage and reduction of carbon emissions through comprehensive sustainability measures. The key components was the install of 2.9 megawatt solar arrays across 8 public buildings, the deployment of 28 EV charging stations, significant HVAC improvements in government buildings, as well as building automations and lighting and upgrades. And my favorite is the install of a electrical microgrid for enhanced energy resiliency. Given the fact that we suffered through Hurricane Sandy back in 2012, where folks did not have power for almost 7 days, we thought that the microgrid would be a sure bet in this area because, in this day and age with the climate going on, you never know what's going to happen. But upon completion, 64% of the town's everyday electrical energy needs will be powered by on-site renewable energy, and the carbon emissions footprint will be reduced by 53% next year. More importantly now, when we first thought of this project, we never anticipated that electricity costs were going to go up 20% throughout the country. So the actual projected investment and return is going to be way more than we ever thought would be. We did receive We'll be receiving $5.5 million in investment tax credits, the direct pay program, once the project is totally complete by the end of this next month in December. We'll be submitting for our tax payment reimbursements, which means the federal government will be sending Piscataway Township a direct check right there to help pay for that. And so what we also did was we received another grant for $250,000 from the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant Program, which U.S. Conference of Mayors actively promoted there for monies towards that. And so, as well as changing, the conference played a big role with Congress and signed into law back when President Biden was president. Towns and cities cannot apply for these federal tax credits. It was only private sector could, or residents. So the law was changed where towns and cities and tribal nations could apply for the tax credits. And quite frankly, unless that happened, this project would have never ever happened and made it work financially. So we're very proud of this. So we leveraged about $13.2 million in rebates, incentives, and grants and everything like that. So, in all said and done, it'll probably just end up costing the local taxpayers about $1.5 million. But more importantly is that we're going to have a very pertinent backup battery power and also solar arrays for futures for 20, 25 years to come. One other slight program was a little bit about the infrastructure hub, but it was a very small project, about $250,000 that went towards our museum. And the significance of that is given the fact that we're having our 250th anniversary of our country and that our town is more than 360 years old. It was the home of the first 4th of July celebration. So the National Park Service, we received a grant through Congressman Plone to the Park Service to retrofit the museum and start towards the addition towards the 250th anniversary. So if you're a history buff, the first 4th of July happened in Piscataway Township, and it was decreed by General Washington in 1778. And the last one was we had about $9 million towards the upgrade of our communication systems for our police department, EMS, and fire. And we installed 3 more communications tower to close in the coverage areas right there. So that project will be online within the next 2 months. So there was a lot going on over the last 24 months in Piscataway Township as far as infrastructure. And that doesn't even include the road projects and all the other things that a lot of the other prior mayors spoke about. Back
Well,
to you, Mayor.
that sounds like remarkable progress right there. And it's really impressive that you've taken one-time dollars and turned that into not only ongoing resiliency, but also affordability in your community, a little protection against rising utility costs. And as
Mayor, one of the things is this was the largest solar install project of any municipality in the state of New Jersey. And the fact is that if a resident wants to come and use the charging stations, they get 2 hours of free time on the charging stations.
Fantastic.
Which is
Thank
really
you, Mayor
good,
Waller.
So
That's remarkable. And as a history major, I appreciate the history lesson as
I
well.
do too. I do too.
Mayor Q, let's go back to you with this, starting off this next question. We've heard a little bit about some of the ways folks have been able to not only access these competitive funds, but create other opportunities as a result of them. Are there other kinds of opportunities that access to federal funding has created for you in Kansas City?
Well, let me start actually with the solar discussion, actually. And so, as you heard from Mayor Waller about his outstanding work in New Jersey, not only do federal funds help support your efforts there, but you build new and key relationships. We have a Solarize KC program. Solarize KC starts with a federal grant about solar in homes. Of course, it's something that's been talked about for some time. We have then leveraged those grants to help develop a better relationship with our local utility, right? Affordable housing groups and others. So we're actually looking at the whole ecosystem of not just renewable energy production from a solar farm in a portion of our city, but also how do we deliver that to lower electric rates for our residents, which at the core is what we're trying to deliver for folks. So for us, it has typically been how not do you just bring in the federal opportunity, but how do you identify strong local partners? Be that from the private sector side or philanthropy, both being very important, by the way. A few repeat players that we've dealt with a lot. Always your electric and gas utilities can be important partners in that area. And so that is a first conversation for us. As for a second step relating to that, we really do look to our philanthropic community. And what I've seen over the years is that helps us go from what used to be rather broad-based requests where they say, wait, what are you looking for $30 million on in housing?
Mm.
To something that has real deliverable metrics, right? If we're looking at how we do better energy usage in homes, if we're actually looking at how we're reducing customers' electric bills, which believe it or not, a lot of our partners actually do want as well, then we can look to housing rehabilitation and others. As one example, a conversation I had this morning related to the fact that a number of our older homes, right, have such high energy costs that rehab becomes inefficient, right? We have folks who can pay mortgages, so we're able to put them in homes,
Mm.
but they can't stay in them for long, right? This allows us to, I think, have that twinning of goals, both the initial grant receipt goal that comes to build a program like Solarize Kansas City, the relationship with the utilities, but then also supporting housing goals where we've also received grants, where we have our own housing trust fund. It is, some people say the cliche whole of government approach to things. I consider this the whole of human approach. So where are you actually helping that in-run consumer, not just from that narrow application where the grant comes in, but really in delivering a way that they can be a successful citizen in your community?
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor Lucas. These really are win-win-win sorts of resources. And on that, Mayor Watson, what kind of opportunities have access to this kind of federal direct funding meant for you in Austin?
Well, to kind of follow up on where Mayor Lucas was talking about, one of the things that when I came back into the mayor's office, as you indicated in that introduction, I came back in January of 2023. And when I did that, one of the goals I wanted to have, Austin had we have an affordability issue, and we need to address that. And of course, the first thing everybody talks about when you talk about affordability is the affordability in housing. And we can all make things more affordable by making them cheaper. But the flip side of that coin is you can make things more affordable by putting more money into people's pockets so they can afford more. And Austin's economic development model or economic development paradigm for years now has been how do we recruit people to Austin? How do we recruit jobs to Austin? And I said I wanted to shift that. I wanted to evolve that economic paradigm model so that what we were doing was Austinites that are already here, how we get them into better paying jobs. And one of the key ways was we created what we call the Austin Infrastructure Academy. And the Austin Infrastructure Academy is built in partnership, the city of Austin, of course, but it's built in partnership with our skilled trades and labor unions and with Austin Community College because what we have about $25 billion worth of infrastructure projects in play. And when I mention three of the biggies, you'll see immediately where it may not be the direct money of IIJA, but it will be federal money. I mean, our transit system is going to require that. We're doing a major expansion at our airport, and we've got an interstate highway that runs through downtown that is being redone. So what we've done is we've created this infrastructure academy where, and by the way, we're not funding it with general fund dollars. We are funding it through CIP money in different utilities. One of the things we also have ongoing is a $1 billion wastewater treatment facility that's going to be built. But to do all that, we're taking money from those utilities and the airport, although because of FAA regulations, it can't give direct money. It's creating apprenticeships at the airport. Well, as you can imagine, what that's doing is it's creating a lot of opportunity for people to stay in Austin. And it goes back to one of my themes in my first comment. It focuses on building the economy, which I think is going to be a key message for local governments as we talk to the federal government right now and for the next few years. One other part of that, and then I'll be quiet about this, is to get back on something that Mayor Lucas was saying when he was talking about housing. One of the things that we have done with regard to our homeless projects and different things we have going on there is we're building in a workforce development component using the Austin Infrastructure Academy. And of course, if you look at what HUD is doing, and I know that's a little bit off topic, but I keep the federal government I dream about the federal government or have nightmares sometimes. But what they're doing is they're looking for HUD is looking for programs that leverage what we're doing in terms of that money with things like creating career opportunities or opportunities for employment. So I think that as long as we need to always think about how we leverage it, and we need to think about how we use it more broadly, and that creates a lot of our opportunity.
Absolutely. And they call it the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act for a reason. Sounds like that's playing out well in your city. Mayor
Good.
Benitez and Mayor Waller, we want to hear from both of you on this question, and then we're going to turn it over to a live Q&A. So if you could share a little bit of your thoughts on what these funds have allowed you to take advantage of in terms of other opportunities, that would be great. Mayor Benitez.
I think for us, like described earlier, we're a small city, right? Being able to get the infrastructure money meant that we were big players. So I think that people view us a little bit different to be like, hey, you guys not only went for the grant, follow up with the different dots and I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed. So they knew we have a team that was serious about the vision that we had, the zero vision, but also like a climate change vision. So this has allowed for us to go after other grants to say like, hey, we're working with this grant, but we also need funding for this other purpose in order for us to combine them. So the city of Monterey right now has every city building has solar panels within them, right? So as you guys know, nobody wants to raise taxes, but everything continues to go up. So we have found ways in which using like, the infrastructure allows us to bring able to bring money to things that we need, but also leveraging, seeing it as a holistic approach. If we have a sidewalk, what does it need? Does it need trees? Does it need like water storm management? Does it need art? The city of Mount Rainier is a very artistic city. We're the gateway to the art district, right? So we managed to like marry everything together for them to realize that we are working on facade improvement for our businesses, green infrastructure. But again, if the streets are not safe for people to walk, people are not going to come. If people do not feel safe, they will not come. So this opportunity has allowed people to see us as, yes, not only do we have a plan of vision, but we also could implement the size of our city shouldn't determine what else we can do. So for us, we also have tied it with like education for our students, right? When it comes to compost, when it comes to like, why is it the sidewalks are permeable, right? So that has allowed for it to open a conversation at a different level in order for the students to learn like this is the reason why we're doing this, what are your suggestions and ideas, and you need to be able to protect the steps that we managed to be able to go after. So to us it has opened a door for people to say like we want to invest on you because you are willing to take the risk and have the skills to be able to approach. And I tell you that sometimes people feel like okay, you are I've only this my fifth year as the mayor, you're technically a young mayor, right? Which means that you might not have the skills. It has definitely blown them out of the water for them to realize that it doesn't matter how long people have been in certain office, right? People have skills and the will and the drive, and you're managed to be able to do this. So again, $9.7 million for a small city. I mean, there's more millions of dollars than how many members of my city there is, right? But it took a lot of time, dedication for us to say, there's people that have been building the vision what the city is, and we want to carry it forward. So to people that are thinking whether or not they should apply, I will say to them that you need to be able to take the risk, and it's a risk that it is supported by other people. So you're not alone in this mission, right? Because they're able to provide data and information, people that would check your application, provide more information for you to be able to express why is it that you want this funding and where you're going to utilize it, but walk with you along the way to make sure you know what you're doing. Because I think most of us, the hardest things that we face is like not increasing taxes, shortage in staff, and how much staff costs to be able to carry missions, right? So this gives you a balance to be able to say, this is what my vision is. I want to make sure I put it all together, and this is what I want in the future, and leverage the different pieces from the state, from the county, more federal money in order to put it all together, in order to make sure that you're utilizing all resources outside your city and not just your tax base in order to continue to change your city, what we called in real time. That's something that we heavily promised, that we were not going to do studies and just archive them, but we were going to go after funds to make sure you will see things in real time, and things were changing. So that has been very important for us, but the ability to leverage that money has allowed us to be able to go after even bigger grants. Right now, we have just been awarded a grant to get not one, but two electrical trash trucks, which will continue build within our vision and mission. But that has allowed for them to say, like, you're very serious about what you're aiming and the steps you're looking forward to. So to me, it's open doors. And as long as you hold the responsibility to be able to follow through the path, you should be able to do more and be able to look for more funding that comes along with it.
That's great. You're taking the risks and you're reaping the rewards. And it sounds like by investing those millions of dollars in infrastructure, you're able to use your other sources to really get much more done for your community. Thank you, Mayor Benitez. Mayor Waller, if you'd like to share just a minute or two on your thoughts on what these opportunities have opened up, if you want to expand on that, we'd be happy to hear from you before we go to live Q&A.
Well, it's no doubt, if it wasn't for the Deficit Reduction Act, a lot of these infrastructure programs would not be happening. Like the investment tax credit direct pay program, where we're able to get additional funds for the solar project, that would never have ever happened, because quite frankly, we all know that there's only a certain amount of bonding you can do to fix infrastructure every year in a community. And then, people like their roads and things to be fixed first in front of their houses, and putting solar arrays on government buildings is probably not on their check their box list. But this was a once in a lifetime chance for Piscataway Township to take care of something that was ultimately going to save us some money in the end game. But more importantly, is now really going to be paying off with the cost of, as I said before, with the cost of electricity going up. And as I said before, with the storms that are more on a more frequent basis, we had to do something about resiliency, because it got to be very challenging for a lot of storms when people were without power. And and I think if it wasn't for the tax credits, we wouldn't have been able to leverage another $13 million in grants there. So this played a significant piece of the puzzle in the overall piece of the pie, or we want to talk about. And I am just so ecstatic about this, that this will be finished out by the end of the year. And I look forward to getting our check within 90 days of January 1st to get that back, so I can get my finance officer off my back. So.
Thank you, Mayor Waller. Thank you for all you're getting done in New Jersey. At this point, we want to make sure we get a chance to take your questions. So thank you, panelists, again, for sharing your insights. We want to hear more from the folks who've joined us today. So if you're participating in this call, please keep dropping questions in the chat. And I now want to pass it over to the one and only Jamie Lavin from Bloomberg Philanthropies to lead our Q&A. Thank you, Jamie, for all you do for mayors and cities.
Oh, thank you guys. This has been an incredible panel. You should see all my notes that I've been taking. And you already hit on, Jason will be saying this, but you've hit on so many of the topics we were hoping to cover. So quick question, Mayor Q, I know you gotta bounce. So I want to hear, how are you telling your residents about what's happening, all the great things we've all been talking about? When the project's not complete, maybe the shovels aren't even on the ground. How are you bringing them along?
That's always an issue, even in times that are somewhat more trying. So, I mean, first, I think upon receipt of any type of grant, you really do need to make sure you're sharing a narrative around it. Even if some of your federal partners might have been the ones who did the initial release, right? You're sharing how it's important with the community. Obviously, easier to do it together, but you built that step one. I think a next step, and this is something I dealt with just this week, There is an inner city street. We've had a share of traffic deaths and unfortunately homicides and others. We received a grant about a year and a half ago in connection with it, and everybody just forgot, right? I think it is important to make sure that you continue to share a narrative of this is really part of almost a capital improvements program. And so it's integrating the grants, as Mayor Waller just noted, into kind of a broader city strategy, because obviously, as the mayors can tell you, I'm sure all of you listening know, right? If we're doing it right, this is actually part of some real long-term planning goal rather than just, hey, we got money, let's spend it as quickly as possible. So that I think is another key step. And then finally, there's the reminding folks when you're actually finally able to do something, even if it's something as simple as issuing RFPs in connection with it, that it all ties back to that initial policy effort. So for the trial lawyers on the call, of which there are probably few, but right, the whole idea is a jury, you tell them what you're going to tell them, you tell them, and then you tell them what you told them, right? I mean, it is largely that as you go throughout this process. That's how I think we do it. Another thing that we got better at in the last portion of the prior administration was in building how our broader grant strategy supports our goals as local government. And so, we have a 5-year business plan in our city. Where do grants fill in with what that step is? We need to continue to make sure that we update that even at times of challenge. And frankly, even where people are saying we're concerned about loss of grants or anything of that sort, it makes a cleaner narrative rather than getting into a fight with Washington pundits or others that you'll never necessarily win, right? You can instead say, well, no, this is actually the important place where we're looking to activate these grants. It also allows for better infill from private partners in the event that you have to have some sort of gap funding during a challenge point. So that's largely how we do it. And, I think it works so far for us.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Lucas. And shout out to the lawyers in the house. Mayor Gaylor Baird, how about you? How you telling residents?
We're involving them in a lot of the work itself as we undertake safe, successful streets for all in Lincoln using a planning grant related to Vision Zero. We are involving the public. And when we get a new crosswalk to a school made more safely, we've gone on site and involved community voices in a press conference showing the results, hearing from parents of children at a school, showing the improvements in being on site, not just being in City Hall doing a press conference here, but going to where the improvements are and highlighting them so that people can connect the dots between this generic word infrastructure and the actual way on the ground it's going to make their life better. We've also phased some of our updates. For instance, we're going to build a second water source, and as we take pipe and start to lay the first pipe in the ground, we did a wonderful press conference with students at the nearby elementary school where they signed the pipe before we buried it. It's opportunities for education of the public about what this means, where it's happening, and how it's going to make their life better. Making sure you're focused on the ultimate goal beyond all the great money that we're getting in. It's about what that money does for people.
I love that idea of finding ways for the public to be tangibly involved, the kids signing the pipe and maybe realizing, water infrastructure is there's a lot underground that we don't all see. Mayor Benitez, I know you also have been involving the kids. Tell us about that.
I think for us, it was important the part of our Vision Zero commitment was also youth, PTO, artists, business owners. So we made sure to take a whole completely holistic approach with the kids since we're very engaged with having green teams in the school, compost teams as well in schools. They get heavily involved in what it looks like. The other thing is we task them as they walk to school to let us know if a sidewalk needs to be addressed or fixed, right? So they become agents of change. So we get different emails of Mayor, on this street when I walk to school, there's a crack. Can you please address it? So we want to make sure we create leaders within the youth in order for them to be and once it's done, we let them know it has been addressed or will be addressed in X, Y, Z, right? The idea is for them to realize that their voice has power and it might not always be answered immediately, to be fixed, but we let them know this is what it looks like in the plans of stuff. The other thing that we heavily do is every week we put information out through notification and we alert the school so that way they know this is what's happening. And as you walk to school or you're driving through school, right? This is the changes that you'll go ahead and see. So for us, it's very important for them to know that things are changing and they're part of the change, but they're also part of that responsibility. And we have a very clear saying here that says like the changes that are made today, they're your responsibility to carry on. In my Rainier, 16 and over do get to vote. So we also remind them that if we're not doing our job, they could vote us out of office as well. So it gives them a different empowerment for them to be like, oh, they are going to listen to me no matter what age we are. And that's part of like our junior program. They're actively like, an extension of, I tell them, you're an extension of my office. So if something's wrong out there, we all are responsible for it. So we all need to report it. So that's part of them being engaged in the process as a young, early age. It doesn't matter if they're preschool or like elementary or mid or high school or even college students, right? We get them involved for them to know that you are important in the process and the changes we make today will affect you later. So if you want to see wonderful trees, great sidewalks, you need to get involved so that way you advocate to make sure and also help us spread the message to the community. So it's cute when little kids tell somebody else like, we've been informed, that that's being done. But it's adorable because, the point is like for them to also know that not only do they get to vote and decide and everything else, but they could also fulfill our shoes and go beyond that because that's what we all want. We don't all want to be mayors forever. We want to make sure that eventually great people take our positions and we go and retire happily ever after, right? But that
Yes,
the cities
yeah.
are in good hands. So I would say that that's at least the way we involve the youth in making sure, along with the community, that this impacts them directly and they're vocal participants when it comes to our decisions.
That's great. Mayor Watson, what's going on in Austin? How are you bringing people along on this infrastructure journey?
Well, what's interesting about your question is just before you got on and started asking that question, I was listening to these great mayors talking about their projects, and I wrote down on my notepad here, our infrastructure work needs to be shown better. I had picked up on what they were doing, and the thought that was in my head is we're not doing as good a job as we should be doing. So I've actually taken notes as I've listened to them.
Why we do this, right?
Well, that's
All
exactly
learn from
right.
each other.
So I feel like this it's been very helpful to me because I really do feel like, and I mean what I just said. I don't think we're doing as good a job as we should be doing in terms of getting out to our public how we're succeeding on these projects. With maybe the exception of the airport, the folks at the airport, they seem like they have something new every week that and they have a an armadillo that they use as kind of the mascot of what's going on. It's not a live armadillo, but Army the armadillo, and they use that to as kind of a mnemonic device to remind people about what's going on. In addition, I do think that we're doing a better job of putting stuff on the website and letting people know the progress that occurs there. But that requires almost more than I want of people having to dig and look for that information. So this is it's very helpful to hear these mayors because I do feel like the ultimate user, the ultimate player in this are going to be the people that you're going to ask for the support on a bond election or something like that. And of course we have a bond election, probably we'll have a bond election in 2026. We've created an advisory group and all of those kinds of things, but the traditional things aren't getting through as much anymore as I think they used to. So what I'm taking away from this is I need to go back and we need to do better.
Yeah, and I think, infrastructure gives us a sort of unique opportunity in that way. Human services sometimes can be very difficult to message what the progress is in negotiating with a new homelessness provider. But infrastructure, you can actually go to the place that's going to be
That is
infected
right.
and think about it.
But with the one big problem, and that is they take forever.
Yeah. And people hate construction.
And that's what I've said about the highway I mentioned earlier. I've been working on that highway since 2011 when I was the vice chair of transportation in the Texas Senate. And what I tell people all the time when I speak about it is everybody's going to hate my guts for the next 10 years, and then nobody's going to remember who brought them this pretty highway. So it'll be over for me.
Yep. Mayor Waller, close us out. How does everyone know that solar is going to benefit them in Piscataway?
Well, here's the one thing there's one program that we have out out for the Piscataway residents. It's called Community Solar. And we have a lot of logistics and data centers within our community. And what we've done through the private sector, through tax credits, through the state, they've been installing a lot of arrays on top of their buildings. So, but what does that mean for the average citizen? If you meet a certain income guideline, you can sign up for the solar community solar program. So if you are renting in an apartment and you want a reduction in your electric bill or something, you can sign up for the program. And then depending upon how much solar is generated on a given month, there's a reduction on your energy bill from that site that goes there. So it's a very unique program to the state of New Jersey, but we've been actively promoting that infrastructure for people who especially meet the income guidelines to sign up. And let's be honest, there's a lot of people that might not want to, even if they have a home, might not want to undertake a project of having solar on their house. But this is a way for them to still participate having solar, but with not the aggravation or anything like that, but yet reap some of the benefits of it, with it being housed on somebody else's facility, which is really unique. And in this day and age, it's mandatory to pretty much that you have to have solar on these big logistics buildings. So that's why we've been trying to promote that with residents to try to take advantage of that program.
Yeah, we know that from the election results, utility and affordability
Yep.
is top of mind for New Jersey voters. So being able to tout how much, some of your lowest income residents have been able to save because of these investments is really
We have more
wonderful.
subscribers than slots.
Ah,
That
that's
that
great. That's a
that
good
want,
problem to have, right?
which is actually a good thing. So
Yeah, yeah, we always want to have more demand for the things we're offering. I cannot thank you enough, mayors, for joining and talking about the projects that you're all developing in your communities. I think we, hear a lot of the grim news about money that isn't reaching communities, and it's so helpful to hear from you all today about what you've been able to do with these dollars and how you're continuing to invest in your community and then leverage them for additional investment. And I know that direct funding to cities was a unique feature of this program, especially to our smallest cities. We want to continue supporting you all and being able to advocate for your community's priorities directly without having to go through the state. So just huge, huge thank you. And hope that everyone has a happy Thanksgiving. We're going to pivot into a little bit of advice for maybe communities who aren't Piscataway, Lincoln, Mount Rainier, and Austin or Kansas City, and are still working on getting that money. So we're going to pull Jason Misselbauer, who is the Director of Grants and Policy from Witt O'Brien's, into the conversation. Jason, I know so much of what you're going to say today, the mayor's covered. So why don't
I
we
know. Yeah.
jump to you?
Yeah, no, and what's the great thing that I heard is not only talking about past grants, from IIJA, but talking about current projects and current funding, that's upcoming for these cities, and everybody that funding still exists. I think Mayor Lucas said that specifically, and The one thing is the dynamics are changing, which I think all the mayors have said, and that's what we're going to talk about here. Next slide. So we had always talked about, when we talk about infrastructure, we always heard, oh, shovel-ready projects. Well, we want to change that philosophy into shovel-ready applications. Next slide. So some things to think about when you're preparing or thinking about pursuing federal funding or just any funding in general, especially given sort of these changing dynamics where timelines are shortening, projects or grant programs are contracting into one funding stream, and just being ready to apply. So in that is your application, is your narrative. So taking your CIP, your capital improvement plan, or your strategic plan, or any other types of planning documents, be it an SS4A planning document, and turning that into an application narrative. So turning it into a project narrative, and thinking through what other dynamics, what other items you need to add to it. Typically, having a templated, this is our city, sort of a city description, demographics, et cetera, having all of that worked out and ready to go on a moment's notice for a funding announcement. Additionally, thinking about through the project, thinking about the different phases of a infrastructure project, and having it broken out in that and thinking of each of those as individual micro projects. And to Mayor Lucas, I think, again, to his credit, talking about sort of having instead of this $30 million project, thinking of shorter, maybe more consumable projects for funders in, I need a planning or I need a feasibility study. I just need design for right now, to move a project forward instead of being bogged down that I need $30 million to cover X, A to Z. Sorry, go back. Sorry. Moving into budget, because part of that is the budget, is just being aware of increased costs and keeping tabs on that. Thinking about value engineering, which is just basically what you're willing to give up in infrastructure, what you're willing to give up in order to continue or to be able to complete a project fully. So it usually talks about costs and maybe not the best the most recent technology, but maybe something that is more cheaper, but still satisfies or gets through to completes the project. The other item here, and we talk about this in sort of a budget prioritization, but it's project prioritization too. Just realizing what projects in that capital improvement plan, planning document, what projects are your priorities? Because in this application preparation stage, you're going to be able to fit these projects probably, in this contraction of federal funding, probably the flexibility within these projects are going to be greater. So you're going to be able to fit a project into multiple funding streams. And if you're not funded here, or if you miss a deadline here, you're going to be able to pivot. So just realizing, okay, these are our top 5 projects that we really want to focus on and really want to make sure that we have them ready to go, and then be able to pivot and put them into the appropriate funding stream. And then finally, leveraging a procurement vehicle that does not cost anything other than time and effort by yourself and procurement staff, but request for information. So getting information, educating yourselves, educating your city on, best practices, current technology, costs, et cetera, engaging contractors, vendors, suppliers around a project and getting an understanding, and then leveraging that information for an application. And then also along these same lines, so this is all work that you can do on any type of project, but let's say you have a grant and you weren't funded. Go back, review the funder feedback, which you should have received, engage the funder, get additional feedback, and then integrate that into a new draft application, have it ready to go so you can, like I said before, pivot to all of the new funding programs that will be coming out in the new year. Next slide. As I said, engage funders, and all grants, regardless, state, federal, foundational, all of it is about relationship management. And especially in this new dynamic where more funding will be coming to states, more federal funding will be coming through the states so they can pass through. Engage at your state early and often. Engage at the department, engage at the governor's office. What are you guys doing? What are your planning? Here is my project. Just engage. And that sort of goes along with that schedule follow-up meetings, schedule follow-up communications. This is where we're at. This is my project. With the funder, internal teams do the same thing. Make that capital improvement plan. Make that project narrative that you created from that capital improvement plan, make it a living, breathing document like a strategic plan, something that you're going in, you're meeting with, seeing about updates, et cetera. And then obviously, as the mayor said, continuing that external stakeholder engagement, community engagement, informing them where you're at in the process. And then finally, I skipped the middle one there, but review awardees and their projects applications. So again, maybe you're not funded. Maybe you've never gone after that funding. Federal agencies announce who was awarded. There may be a city, somebody next door or somebody that you're involved with. Maybe your mayor knows their mayor, et cetera. Engage them, talk to them about their successful application, et cetera. Next slide. So moving away from sort of that being prepared and application development piece, pre-award piece, into, and I think every mayor hit on this, especially Mayor Waller and Mayor Watson hit on this a lot. And I know Mayor Watson mentioned about not telling his story well enough, but I think from some of his comments, I think they're telling their story pretty well already. But there's always room for improvement, and part of that is that return on investment. Pivoting. A lot of the federal agencies are being guided by business, private sector, non-governmental folks who understand return on investment, and they're involved in the award decision-making process. So next slide. So just going to go through some of this about focusing on this. So that shift where no longer are grants about a project, they're about an investment, and moving away from a focus on outputs. I delivered or I improved 8 miles of sidewalks, and now 8,000 kids are walking on that sidewalk. Talking about federal agencies are asking for that dollar spent, for every dollar spent, what is the lasting value that was created by your project for the public? So thinking about it in that terms, and being able to communicate that in your application, in your reporting, but also in future applications about what type of good steward, good investment you are. Next slide. So part of that is defining ROI in public sector terms. So again, moving beyond sort of outputs into these 4 areas. So efficiency gains. So this is just basically being able to really look at it as from an outcome perspective, but enhancing that perspective with relating it to cost savings, time saved, sort of process improvement, et cetera. Economic multipliers. A lot of the mayors talked about sort of that economic development piece, which a lot of people already think about when they're thinking about ROI. Long-term benefits. So this was talking about risk reduction, preventing floods, reducing maintenance cost, et cetera. And then public trust and transparency. This is about, hey, I delivered the grant, the federally funded project on time, on budget, didn't need a cost extension. I deliver, and I delivered it compliantly as well. So again, being able to communicate sort of across all 4 of these in an application, showing, communicating it pre, post, and then at application to your community, but also to funders. Next slide. And then this just talks about sort of, what I mentioned about that pre-award. So building it into your application, talking about what, using the data that you're receiving. Lots of these infrastructure talks about a cost benefit analysis, doing the same, but doing it in a larger scale across all of your work, all of your effort when it comes to an application or about a project. Next slide. And then, again, incorporating this, ingraining this into your current process. So, one source, not all of us will have, economists or maybe universities, community colleges in our area, but leveraging those if you do have them. But a lot of us do have economic development teams or an economic development component in our cities, and leveraging those folks to help you develop an ROI, not only from an economic development perspective, but across all of those different lanes, and thinking through how we can express that and incorporate that into our application and into our reporting. And then finally, taking a lot of us, created dashboards, infographics, et cetera, from our state and local fiscal recovery fund, leveraging that work to then now express it in ROI terms, moving forward. Next slide. And then, as I mentioned, again, reframing this, sorry about that, reframing this into our reports, be it programmatic reports, annual reports, financial reports, making it more about a return on investment, not just about the activities or what we've completed, our expenditures, talking about an investment report, and translating that into something that is consumable for the public, but also the funders. Next slide. And then finally, mentioned we talk about sustainability, but this isn't the sustainability that maybe a lot of us are thinking about. This is about, in grants, we used to talk about sustainability. Well, past, what's your funding mechanism or funding strategy past, the grant period. Now it's talking about what's the value of your project past the grant period, project period, and being able to state that, show that, and continue to report on that, at least outwardly, and then incorporate that into your applications moving forward. And I believe that's it, Jamie. I
Great.
wanted to
Thank you,
make sure.
Jason.
Yep.
Impressive getting through all of that in a brief amount of time. I know we're coming up on the hour, so I'm going to put up a slide with some of the offerings we have, and then we can stay on for a few minutes if folks have questions. But I just want to make sure you all get this and that you fill out the poll that we're going to pull up about today's session and what we can continue doing to support you. So we have a few things coming up on the Local Infrastructure Hub. We want to make sure you all get to sign up for those. One is we're going to be having a session December 9th after the holiday. For cities that are starting to think about AVs, what that would look like on their streets. And we're going to be talking to cities that already have them on the ground. What is it they wish they had known before AVs showed up on their streets? What do they know now? And what can they share with you all as you start planning for what might be coming to your streets? Safe Streets and Roads for All. We're going to be hosting an expedited workshop to help folks. We don't know, exactly when the Safe Streets NOFA will hit, but this will be the last round of this program. It's been a huge boon for cities. It's only for local jurisdictions. States can't apply for that funding. And there's a lot of money, non-competitive money for planning, especially. You heard from most of the cities on today that they've gotten some Safe Streets funding and what it's meant for their communities. So I'd encourage you all to apply. So check out our resources there. Clean and Drinking Water State Revolving Funds. We had a session a couple of weeks ago about these programs. These are administered through the states, but they are federal money. And we really encourage you, if you have a water project, whether it's a waste treatment issue or drinking water issue, if you still have lead service lines that need to be replaced, this will be a good one to check out on February 5th. And then we're going to be hosting an expedited workshop, the types of things that Jason was just talking about, in addition to how do you make sure that your RFPs are being used as strategic instruments, and that you're really getting value out of those on September 26th. And then all throughout the winter next year, January through March, we'll be hosting our last Safe Streets and Roads for All boot camp. So again, if you're just starting out in Safe Streets and could use some help, encourage you all to sign up the QR codes there. I didn't see the poll come up. Hopefully, you all got it on your end. Ah, here we go. So if you could just take a moment to fill it out, it really does help inform what we do. As Jason said, funders are interested in getting feedback and knowing what the return is and making sure we're centering what we do based on your demand. So with that, I'll pause and see if there's any questions. Maybe Jason, I'll just ask you one while we're having folks fill out the poll.
Yep.
I heard from a lot of cities while we're in Salt Lake City at NLC Summit, City Summit, that are just incredibly frustrated. They were told they were getting money. They don't really know what's happening to it. Like, why should cities continue putting themselves out there for these investments, investing the time and the resources, and how should they be thinking about that?
So yeah, thank you, Jamie, and definitely heard that, the frustration level and understand it too. If not you, who is one of the things, that funding still exists and funding will still move. And at some point, and I think this will be 2026, that we'll get back to, well, we'll get a new normal, and funding will be moving, as I said, a new dynamic and a new speed, but that you can leverage this funding, in a different way now, with the way that with the pass-throughs coming to states. So it'll just be I think that there'll be more flexibility in that dynamic, states will be looking to you all and will know you better because of the intimacy of having dealings with you. So I guess, uh, you know, uh, if anything, I would say, to engage your states now and educate them about your projects because of that dynamic change that, your frustration with the federal government that component will for the most part will be removed because it'll be the state that you're dealing with now instead of the federal government.
Yeah, and maybe if I could just put a plug for I added in the chat. The EPA just published its NOFO for brownfields cleanup and assessment. So if you're in a moment where you're feeling like there's no funding left, as Jason said, there continues to be funding available. As Mayor Benita said, this can be historic funding, right? And more than you might be able to get in a pass through from the state. So while we know that there's frustrations in the administration of these funds, we would encourage you as the last sort of cycles of the IIJA money come out to continue applying for those and seeking those. And as Mayor Waller said, the IRA tax credits make sure that if you've done something that's eligible for a tax credit, you're filing with the IRS. I mean, the check comes in the mail. This is not discretionary funding. This is if you did it and you meet the qualifications, you get it. So if you need help, you did something, you think it might qualify, you need some help, please do reach out to us. We have experts available who can help you sort of with the filing process with the IRS. And with that, want to say just a huge thank you to Mayor Gaylor Baird for helping to moderate today's conversation, to our incredible partners at the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Results for America, and all of the partners on the local infrastructure hub. It's hard to believe we're at our 100th session, and we just are really grateful for your continued partnership and participation, and just want to continue making this a valuable resource for you. So reach out if there's anything we can do, and have a very, very happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.